Thanks very much. Those of you that have joined, many thanks for attending, and thanks to Lee Douglas, Joe, Gareth, and the Saxis team for arranging this WebEx webinar today. So, just by way of a quick introduction, my name's John Chaplin. I'm the UK and I distribution manager here at Commvault. And work very, very closely with CMS, some of whom are actually on the call here with us today, and also with Saxis. Saxis are a very, very valued premier partner for us and have a lot of skills around Commvault. So perfectly placed to help you out with any questions, etc. after this webinar. I'll shortly hand you over to Tony Kincaid and Nathan Gilks, who manage our ThreatWise business here in the UK. But just a couple of quick words from me. I'm sort of led to believe that hopefully the vast majority of you that have dialed in are familiar with Commvault anyway, and are probably, so I won't talk about our 27-year heritage in backup and recovery because you'll already know that, and the fact that we protect your data across every workload, every platform, whether it's on-prem, cloud or SaaS. So that's not what we're here to talk about today. There's been a lot of noise in the marketplace and just in general across every industry around ransomware, how it's evolved, how we're constantly trying to keep up with those bad actors that are trying to get hold of data, the fact that they're now not just locking you out from your data, but they're now threatening people with, actually releasing that data out into the marketplace if ransoms aren't paid. And again, there's been a lot of talk from other vendors that we are peered with in the industry about these kinds of insurance policies that they'll pay out after your data horse has bolted, which is great. But what if there was another way? What if there was a way of actually proactively identifying, containing, and dealing with ransomware attacks, either as they are trying to happen or before they happen? And this is what we're going to be talking to you about today with the ThreatWise solution, which is actually part of our Commvault Metallic portfolio. So what I'll do is I'll stop talking because I could talk forever, as a lot of people on this call will probably realise, and hand over to people who are much more intelligent than I. So that will be Tony and Nathan. So Tony, Nathan, if you're ready, if you want to introduce yourselves, over to you.
Thanks, John. I'm Tony Kincaid. I'm joined by Nathan. We've been part of the organisation that was acquired. We lead the business, have done for the past 4 years. Let's kick in. So it's really a short introduction into the topic of deception. We've seen quite a lot of press coverage recently around this subject. So today's session, we want to give you an overview, but we don't want this to be slideware. Nathan's actually going to be showing you via the GUI what you'd be able to deploy, the architecture, and demonstrate some of those use cases. But most importantly, the forensics and the high fidelity alerts that are generated as part of the solution. You'll see some additional content here. Obviously, we'll share this as part of today's session. In terms of what we're going to cover, we won't be able to cover sort of everything, but if you would like to have a more customized discussion and demonstration around your environment, how deception can be part of a strategy in terms of sort of ransomware protection, then we'd be happy to follow up. So look forward to that. Look, a couple of years ago, I just wanted to show this because Gartner did actually do a deep dive around sort of some of the leading vendors. There haven't been that many in this space, focused on the types of decoys, how to create distributed decoy environments, the laws that can be added to endpoints and devices across your network, and a couple of the additional components of deception like beaconized documents that if opened, removed, and opened, call back home. And these all can be sort of embedded into your environment to create those high fidelity alerts. So the report ID is here. If you'd like to access this, you've got a Gartner account, you'll be able to. But as I said, Nathan and I were part of sort of TrapX prior to the acquisition last year. But I suppose, really from your perspective, I get asked this a lot, who else is deploying this technology? So we've actually got over 300 customers just from the EMEA region. We have a business that's sort of headquartered over in the US, not far from Tinton Falls anyway, and also a South American business unit as well. But I suppose just in the last 6 months, we've seen a 2x increase in terms of the number of customers. But for us here in the UK and on the call, I just wanted to share a recent article. It was dropped into the Telegraph by Gareth Caulfield, Jonathan, two of the Telegraph's journalists. It's pretty recent, so only 15 days ago, and it gives you proof, I suppose, that we're seeing critical national infrastructures deploying deception and honeypot technologies as part of their defense against the ransomware gangs, really. So let's just look at maybe a few of the areas where deception comes into its own. If we take high fidelity alerting, one of the issues is organizations have a volume of devices that are out there. They're all creating logs, and those log informations are reporting into your security incident and event management products. But what we have a strategy of deploying devices that are effectively look like real systems that the attackers would want to target. And we can even go back to N-1, N-2, older versions, because we've seen through the playbooks like Conti and Hive and other ransomware gangs, they're obviously looking for the easy target, the path of least resistance. So by deploying real looking systems, services on your network that also can be more vulnerable than maybe your patched or updated systems, you therefore know that by interacting with one of the decoys, you're going to generate a high fidelity alert. We've also seen organizations use it for internal detection. One of the key things, whether it be an insider threat or an attacker, is lateral movement and privilege escalation. And again, through the deployment of the decoys, we track and monitor those TTPs, the techniques and tactics that the attackers would use, and that's hard coded into the platform. So when we see that, we create the high fidelity alert. That's also part of the attack attribution. So, you know, again, those tactics, techniques, and procedures. For example, if you look at the MITRE framework, which is well recognized in the cybersecurity industry, we have built that in terms of the reporting, so it makes it easy to identify the types of exploits that are being run. And actually, if we move on, what's really interesting, if you look at Vault Typhoon, Microsoft released this as a white paper recently, and we've done our own white paper, which again we'll share as part of this follow-up. But it talks about some of the stealth techniques, and we're using some of the systems and exploits that are built in natively into Windows, and using those as part of the attack. So how do you as an end user really differentiate between what is a real system exploit versus what an attacker may be using as part of their targeted attack? And that's where the technology, our technology, really comes into its own. And there's as I say, a full paper on this where we show some of the steps that we go through that are highlighted here in points 1 to 4, and how the technology really highlights that. So at a high level, really, what's the components of the solution? Well, we have the laws on the left-hand side, as you can see here. These are the bait that are dotted about. They're tokens, they're agentless, they're quick to deploy. As an example, a couple of tokens. One could be a VPN token. We could use Fortinet as an example, and then we could use hidden credentials that could be stored in an endpoint or a machine on the network. Why would that be important? Well, obviously, if an attacker is coming in, for example, business email compromise or a targeted spear phishing type of attack, they want to then get from that machine, if the user has accidentally clicked on the link, allow some malware to be deployed, but they need to get from that machine then into the internal network. One of the great ways of doing that is through the laws. And as I say, Nathan may even show you as part of the demo that remote worker law, where it's part of the VPN decoy or token and the hidden credential token, when used together, create that high fidelity alert. In the middle are our threat sensors. These can be servers, networking device, maybe IoT devices. It can even be specific custom-based devices, because we can use our custom feature to replicate some critical systems that you have, or it may be databases, SAP, Oracle, MySQL Server, some of your crown jewels that you want to protect. Those all reside as fake decoys on our virtual machine that gets deployed into the network. And then the final piece of the jigsaw is the full system sensor, which could be described by many as traditional classic honeypots. And then we, through our intellectual property, have the ability to create multiple threat sensors that report or proxy to full system sensors. And that allows it to create the realism that's needed, so an attacker can't determine that he's actually engaging with a decoy. So the experience is, for example, a full Windows 2019 server, and you can add lots of content to that server to enhance the realism, but also to engage the attacker, for example, having Excel documents that may look like confidential documents or privileged account documents, password protected, that then use the time of the attacker where he's not on your real systems. So, quick overview of the solution. What we'd love to do, I'll hand you over to Nathan. He'll take you through quickly the architecture and, most importantly, drop into the product and show a few of these live. Thanks, Nathan.
Thanks, Tony. Okay, morning, everyone. I only have one slide, which I promise I will get through really quickly, even faster if I have the wrong slide. Hold on, let's go back. There we go. Right, okay, so we're going to just walk through the components of the solution. I'm going to draw on the screen for you so you can see what's going on. Okay, at the top here, we have the TSOC. TSOC is the ThreatWise Security Operations Console. This part is within the Metallic Cloud, so we look after this, we host it. We are responsible for updates and patches and so on. This is where you would log in to create deception, manage deception, receive alerts coming in from any of the traps. It's the sort of web interface. We're going to log into that shortly and see that live on my system. The actual piece that is deployed in your environment, the first component is the appliance. So it's a virtual appliance. This is basically where the main decoys or traps would be deployed. So this appliance is a virtual machine. It can store up to 512 different decoys. Each decoy requires an IP address. But what's really important here is we can deploy any combination of IT assets, OT assets, IoT assets. If, for example, you want to deploy 100 Windows traps, Windows Server traps on this appliance, so let's suppose you have a use case for 100 Windows traps on that appliance, that's just 100 IP addresses. There's no licenses for the Windows element. There's no VMware licensing, etc. So it's nice and easy to get deployed, just IP addresses. Once these are out there, they are going to respond to anything that touches that IP address, whether it comes direct or via some bait from an endpoint, and it will trigger an event. The event will arrive at TSOC, and the alert will tell you what the attackers are trying to do. So that's the first part of our sort of solution deployment. The second part is getting, as Tony mentioned, these lures deployed. These are what are installed to the endpoints on the network. So these would be your sort of Windows devices with my really bad drawing, but you've got your Windows devices out here, and we will drop off the bait onto those machines. We also cover Mac OS and Linux endpoints, but the most common would be Windows. Now, we do this without any endpoint software. So what we're actually doing is installing small changes to the sort of applications or the Windows OS. So, for example, we're installing fake credentials in the credential manager, which I'll show you in a use case on a demonstration. We could be adding bookmarks, we could be dropping off shortcuts, RDP shortcuts, etc. So there's a huge amount of things we can do to entice the attacker to come from that endpoint and touch one of these decoys on the appliance up here. So that's all about baiting the attacker away from your real assets and into these traps. And then the final part, as Tony mentioned, is the full system decoy, which is very much like a traditional honeypot. In this example, you can provide a VM of a gold image. So let's suppose that's a Windows server. We could install a very small piece of software on here, and that turns that machine into a trap. So that's the whole machine becomes a trap in itself. And then anything that touches this machine will generate an event and sent back to your TSOC up here. And also, we can use this machine to enhance your traps that live on the appliance. So the traps on the appliance are what we call medium interaction decoys, and these ones are high interaction decoys, and we can actually enhance the medium ones using the high interaction. As an example, your 100 Windows servers on the appliance could be Windows web servers. And if you wanted to go beyond the default content that we host, we can actually have content proxied from this real machine to your traps over here, which means when the attacker comes in over, touches your trap, he gets content that comes from a real web server, which might have much more depth to it. So it's all about enhancing and giving the attacker a bit more of an experience when they come into the network when they've breached it. That's the complete solution. There's no hidden features. Everything there is included in the license for the solution, and it's very straightforward to get deployed. What I'm going to do is actually go straight into the product so we can see it live. And what I've got is a TSOC running. This is my TSOC, and at the moment we have one event that's touched the traps that I have on the appliance. You can see here on the left hand side it says I have 15 emulation traps. Those are the ones that live on the appliance. So I have 15 traps currently. I'm going to add a new one so you can see the process of getting a new trap deployed. And I've got one full OS trap, which is the real machine that has that software running on it that's turned that into a trap as well. So okay, so one event's arrived. You can see here we've got different severities coming through. We'll increase this number as we start doing some events and testing on this deployment. Okay, so on my appliance, which I've got here in my department, which is EMEA, I'm just going to connect to it. So I just click on the icon for it. These are my current traps that are deployed out there. So you can see I've got all sorts of combinations of things. Windows servers, 2016 server, got an SAP server, Mac OS, Windows XP. Some of our customers have real legacy OSs and they want to be able to deploy traps that they can sort of surround those assets with, and almost like a virtual patching by having loads of more assets, fake ones, to increase the attack surface. So what I will do is just walk through the process of adding a brand new trap. This is the manual process. So I'm just going to put in, let's call it demo 1. And I need to assign an IP address. So let's go with one that's down here, 123. That makes it nice and easy to remember. I can make my trap blend into the network. So if you want this to be, let's say it is going to be a web server, I can, make the hostname blend in. I can make the domain blend in. This is all free-form text. You can type in what you like. There's no requirement here to integrate it to your AD at this point. You notice here I'm selecting the manual wizard. This means we're going to walk through the screenshots manually so you can see them, which makes sense. We can also do it through an automated discovery mechanism as well, but you won't see much on the screen. So let's go for the manual version. So my second task is to decide what type of trap I want to deploy. So you can see here on the left-hand side, I have different categories from Windows workstations, Mac OS, could be a Windows Server. I have the option to deploy a Commvault backup server, fake one. I could be a printer, or if I'm in certain sectors, maybe medical sector, I could be a CT scanner. And we have various categories for different verticals, ATM, cache point machine. We also have certain features for remote, covering remote workers, and we'll have a look at the VPN trap in a short while. And here I've got a custom category where I've actually asked my appliance to build me a custom trap based on a Fortinet firewall as well. So lots of flexibility. I will just quickly deploy a Windows server. So remember, there's no requirement for any ISOs, no licensing for Windows at this point at all. I'm just going to create this emulation, a fake version of a Windows server. So I can choose different OS types. I can go legacy. I can go modern. I'll go for something in between. Let's just do a 2012 R2. And these are my default services running on this trap. I'll just click on apply, and this will take a couple of seconds, and that trap will be complete. There we go, finished. So now on that IP address, I'll have a new trap for Windows Server running on that appliance on the network, and ready for listening for any connections coming into it. So it should appear at the bottom. Here it is. It's just arrived. So if I just grab that IP address, pop that into my browser. So the web service was running on that. So you can see I get a response from the default web service on that. So it looks like a brand new Windows 2012 R2 server when you've just turned on IIS. You can actually add content to the appliance, so we can actually deliver content to the attacker. So you can reskin what you see here, so it's not so static and boring. Also on this particular trap, I had the FTP service running. So if I just do an FTP service connection to the trap 1123, you can see I get a response saying, welcome to my Microsoft FTP service. And the default configuration is anonymous, so I can log in with anything I like. And at this point, I'm now interacting with this trap, and I can make a directory here called, let's call it malware. And so we can see that there is a directory existing on this server that I believe is a real server. Of course, it's fake. It's there. So if I now go back to my dashboard, we'll see the events have increased. We have a lot more activity. Also, I have another trap on my emulations. In my analysis, we can see that we have something's touched my demo 1 trap using the HTTP protocol. If I open this, we can see that I can record the source of the attacker. I can see what they're connecting to, which is my new server here that we just created. And we've automatically mapped in the motives of the attacker using the MITRE attack framework. So lateral movement would be the motive. Now, any traps on this appliance are jailed. So I can't move around from trap to trap. And more importantly, I can't go from trap to real asset on a network. So I am jailed inside here. That's important because we allow, obviously, the attacker to upload binaries to these traps. They act like real servers. So if I were to upload a file to this trap, we would capture that and detonate it in our sandbox. That's also included. and we can tell you what the payload was, what was contained in that payload. On the FTP one, on the session we just did, you can also see that we've recorded every command that I issued to the command line. So I logged in here as the anonymous user. I made a directory called malware, and that's also been recorded. So let's quickly take that one step further. I have a trap that I built that's more blended into the network. It's got more content on it, so it looks more realistic. If I try to connect to that trap on its IP address, so that's on 107. If I tried the anonymous login first, it's going to fail. It will fail because I've added some more stricter password policies to this trap. So we don't allow anonymous login. We require you to authenticate. So the attacker may try to do a brute force. They might launch a dictionary attack or something on this trap. Let's suppose I've just done that and I found the credentials, and I will now log in with those credentials that I found. The username was Nathan and the password was password1. And when I get connected, you can see here I've now got content on that file server. The structures come back. This is all stored on the appliance that is on the trap. So we let you create your own structure. If I were to connect to the C drive, you'd get the program files and all the relevant folders, data folder, and so on, just like it's a real machine. And we can see here that if I go into the folder, I've got some data in there which I can drop down to my local machine. I can also upload files to that as well, so we can drop things off and they will store on here like a real server. And again, this would be captured and we would analyze it for malware. So going back to my example, we can see here is an interaction now, and we'll find that we were able to log in with Nathan, and when you scroll down the events, there's much more activity, and you'll see that I was inside this customer data files folder. And when I was browsing around that, I actually retrieved, stole some spreadsheets from the folder, and there's the second one, customer data. And I also uploaded a file, which is that PDF that I stored here. So we will find that we also capture that file and we analyze the MD5, and we also check it for viruses, and then we also send it to the sandbox. Okay, couple of quick more use cases before I hand back to Tony. Tony mentioned about the work from home VPN scenario. So imagine this screen, this PC you're looking at right now is my home PC. I work from home and I've been breached. One thing the attacker may do is explore the credential manager on the endpoint. I can type it correctly. There we go. The credential manager is in this scenario, we've deployed some bait, those lures, and you can see that I've got entries in here. These all point to traps on the appliance. So some of them are direct URLs that speak to different traps. These ones here are RDP shortcuts for RDP traps. And if I scroll down, we've got one here, which is a Fortinet VPN credential. That's the one of interest because I want to break into the VPN. So, of course, it's a fake VPN. So this is my credential set that I need. And of course, I can't see the password because it's been obfuscated, but that's okay, because what I can do is I can run Mimikatz and that can extract the password. Now I've done that already to save time. So if I find it is my output from the password dump. So if I look for the Fortinet credential, here it is. So the password that I needed was this one here. Okay, so let's just grab that. If I open my browser, the second part of the lure is I have a bookmark. Now this bookmark is special. So if the end user this is the real laptop, were to click on this bookmark, no event will arrive on the trap. So I can click this as much as I like, there'd be no event arrive. So there's essentially no false positive. If I go to the interface of the VPN. Here it is, and I typed in some random login. So let's call it, well, let's put in Tony and put in password. Again, no event will arrive. And that's quite important because we don't want any false positives. If I go to my analysis, it'll be silent. And so at the moment, there has been nothing touched my work from home trap yet. If I go back to this bookmark and I now type in the correct credentials, so it was Nathan and password and the password that I stole from the machine. That's actually going to now trigger the event on my analyzer. So we've used there it is, which just arrived at the top, work from home threat sensor. So this is basically taken the stolen credentials and the URL for the VPN, and those two things were positive. Therefore, I've triggered the event. So this endpoint has touched this trap, which is a VPN trap, and you can see that the tactics that we've associated this with from the MITRE framework is, well, the attacker's trying to get initial access, gain persistence to the network, and he's also accessed some credentials. And we can see here we've got the VPN stolen credential trigger has been alerted. If I scroll down, we've got this stamp that gives us the serial number, the machine ID, the username of where it's come from. So we know that this is 100% validation that this has been a breach, because these credentials are only available in the world of deception. We created them and we issued them. Therefore, if they have been extracted and used, then the machine has been breached. So that is a positive alert coming into the SOC, which of course we can send in real time to the SIEM using syslog as well. Okay, so final use case. And here, no, not there. Here, I have a script that I'm just going to launch from this Windows 10 machine. So in this example, this Windows 10 machine has again been breached, and it's using a silent threat, a stealth threat that Tony mentioned. So it's based on Vault Typhoon, which is essentially the attackers are using lol bins, which means that they're living off the land. They're using tools that are on the machine to manipulate what their end goal. In this case, they want to dump the AD database from the AD server, and to do that, they're going to connect to a machine remotely, authenticate. So to do that, they would have to steal the credentials, which we can obviously leave for them somewhere. And here you can see they're going to launch the command prompt, make a directory, dump the NT database, and leave it in a folder called hacked. So we'll launch that script. That's going to run from this machine, touch another machine, but what he doesn't realize is it's actually a trap. And if I use the credentials, which I would have stolen, that's run the process, and immediately we have received an event for the protocol WMI, and here it is. So it's using the WMI console to connect into this trap, which is my full OS trap. That's my high interaction real machine. And we can see here that the most important aspect is this is the event that we want to send to the SOC, saying that, okay, someone's trying to dump your AD database, and they're putting it into this temp folder on this machine that they're connecting to, which of course in this case would be the trap. So that's interesting, because actually when we tested this in the lab against lots of different EDR products, this actually went straight through. There was no events arriving into the SOC from the EDR tools. So this was basically bypassing endpoint controls. So Vault Typhoon is quite important. There's a nice white paper, as Tony mentioned. There is a new variant now called Flax Typhoon, which is more interesting. We don't have time really to talk about that, but worth having a look at as well. It's also another stealth attack that has just been recognized by, again, Microsoft as well. Okay, all right, so there's a lot of information squeezed into that, so it's probably a good job we did record it, which is good. And if when we do it one-on-one, it's much more relaxed in terms of we have more time, so it would be a bit more relaxed. But I'll hand back to Tony, and then we'll also have some time for some questions as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Nathan. Just to wrap up, I just want to close out with the last thing that we talked about was sort of, I suppose, how we support you, evaluating sort of next steps. Look, the one of the real uniques in our product is the ability to deploy this very quickly. So because we have the whole of the GUI, which Nathan was showing you, the management, all the deployment capability that is in TSOC, our management GUI in Metallic in Azure. All you need to do is click on the metallic.io trial, fill in the details, select threat-wise, and you can be up and running in 48 hours. We just would need one ESX virtual machine. We can share the system requirements for that, but then we'd also handhold you guys through deploying those decoys. And as they're passive, we have had customers deploy as part of POC into live environments because there's no impact in your network. In fact, there's only a benefit because obviously you get to see the activity, the reporting, the forensics as well. So it's real proof of the pudding, so to speak. But if you want that, it's very straightforward. If you prefer a separate session, just reach out. We'd be happy to support you. So hopefully we've given you at least a high-level overview in today's session. I think we've got enough time, sort of, we'll certainly give you some time back, but maybe a few questions will eat into that if anyone's got any they want to ask.
Either shy or stunned silence there, Tony, I think.
No, sure. It's understandable.
Danny has a question.
So, yeah.
Can I ask something? So one thing you didn't show us on those menus when you were setting up the sensors was the network device options.
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell me a bit more about what you can offer on that front?
Yeah, so default ones are Juniper, Cisco, and let me just check. So for example, you can deploy a Cisco switch, and the default is it's SSH enabled, but you could also enable web interface, which means that the attacker will get a GUI to play with, as well as being able to go into the console and go into enable mode, show interfaces, change interfaces, and all the things they would normally do with a Cisco switch.
Okay.
So you can get the alert coming in on that straight away. Now, if you have something that's not a Cisco switch, then we have this build your own trap feature, which lets you build your own custom version of a trap. We can grab the front end, or we can grab the open ports, and we can build a template based on that as well. So the ones that are built in are more in-depth. Ones that you build from the build your own trap give you a sort of halfway house, I guess. It's a great way of getting custom traps without having to come back to the vendor and saying, can you build me a template for XYZ? Yeah.
Danny, we've got a list of threat decoy types as well as the available services. So if it's a Windows server back to 03 service pack 1, and then as Nathan says, the related services, so SMB, web, FTP, etc. But that's all on the list. I'll share that following this call, so you've got that as well. No problem. Thanks, Danny. Great question.
Any other questions from anybody? Looks like we might be good to go. I can't see any other raised hands. I think Tony, Nathan, thanks ever so much for those insights there. I'll just round off a little bit without waffling too much again, but just highlighting the fact that this is by far, threat-wise, is by far at the moment becoming the most frequent and popular conversation around product set that we're speaking to people about, and I think that shows the importance of it, and the awareness and concern around ransomware, and the desire really to try to do something proactive about it, as we mentioned at the beginning of the call. I think I'll finish off by just relaying a little story that I think Nathan might have relayed actually, when we were at the recent CMS event on HMS Belfast, their security event. And at no point am I suggesting we should feel sorry for casinos, because obviously the house always wins, but just to show how clever these people are. I believe that there was an attack that was executed via the digital control on a casino's very, very flash and extensive and expensive fish tank in their foyer. So let's not any of us be complacent, and ThreatRise really can help, with deploying of the traps, that could be made to look like printers or servers or security cameras. So if there's any other information that you require, or as Tony and Nathan have explained, a one-on-one demo diving even deeper, we would be more than happy in conjunction with Saxis to arrange that with you. So I guess it only remains to say thank you for your time this morning. Thank you again to Saxis for arranging this, and we'll send all the collateral that we've had. There'll be links to the recording, I guess, Saxis, that you can access if you want to, and we look forward to hopefully hearing from you very, very soon.